Welcome back to the High Performance Herd. Today, we're fortunate to have James Freeman, the CEO of PJ Fitzpatrick, with us. He and I have had some conversation over the last week, and I'm excited to have him to tell about his story and how he's driven great results at PJ Fitzpatrick. James, welcome.
David, thank you for having me.
So just to start off with, we'll talk about original leadership and other stuff. Tell us a little bit about PJ Fitzpatrick.
So PJ Fitzpatrick is a 46-year-old home improvement company. It was started by Peter John Fitzpatrick. He was a very, very unique leader in comparison to, and had thoughts around how to support employees and how to be able to provide great customer service to potential customers via taking care of your employees. He had some unique attributes, unique things that he inserted into the business. And just to give you an example, he was offering health benefits and paid time off to field workers in the 1980s and 1990s, long before, that was an industry norm, and was really something that unless you were in a union environment, you probably didn't see any type of exposure to it. So, that DNA, that foundation has been able to enable us over the past 46 years to grow, but to grow responsibly, to have a path that we were following in terms of commitment to our employees, commitment to our customers, and we get to win as a result of that. He carried the flag through 2008. His son-in-law, Rick Stover, and his oldest daughter, Teresa Fitzpatrick, purchased the business from him. He was still around, but was starting to move off into retirement and enjoying the hard work that he had gone through for the almost 40 years leading into that, or 30 years leading into that. Rick and Teresa picked right up from and built upon the foundation that he had kind of set for the business. And during that period from 2008 to 2020, they grew the business. They created opportunities for others, but they also didn't have enough growth and enough emphasis on how to grow, and ultimately lost good people along the way that were happy with PJ, and enjoyed the environment, but weren't ready to, take steps back or wait for the growth to come to them. So that's how I came into the business in 2020. Rick and Teresa made a decision that they really wanted to accelerate the growth, create the opportunities for the people they cared about. And we'll talk about that as we go on. But that's how I came to play, was the decision to go from, the founders / second generation to, hey, we really want to grow. Let's make some decisions on how to do so.
So that gives us a little backstory on PJ Fitzpatrick. Now we'll get a little of yours. If you think back and go, well, here's when I first was drawn to leadership. Here was kind of origin of leadership for you. Here's kind of early memories of, hey, I want to lead people. What would that be for you?
From when I was 5, I was playing organized sports. And, along the way in organized sports, there's always going to be the people who are high performers, but there are the people who are high performers and bring others along with them. And I tended to be that person, even from a young age, that cared about how I was going to perform, but understood that I was only going to get as far as the people around me. So being able to be a support system, being a person that would put their arm around the person when they needed it, or maybe kick them in the butt or give them a little bit of push when they needed that in a different type of situation, that's been in my DNA since I was a kid. And I always, in my vision, equated success with leadership. Now, I know that's not necessarily the case today, but it did set me off on a path of where the correlation wasn't right. In hindsight, it still guided me towards being a leader, and I can't imagine being anything else.
And I think when we talked last time, grew up in Pennsylvania.
I did, Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Yeah. So, strong sports culture in that area of the country for sure. What sports did you play?
I played baseball. I played football. I played basketball. I was primarily baseball and basketball were my two that I was pretty darn good at. And, but again, it's two different worlds. One where your individual contribution, you're giving individual contributions in many cases to a team whole versus a true team sport where how you move and flow dictates the success of your team. But both of those scenarios, you need somebody who's going to, take the onus of guiding the culture, the competitiveness, and ultimately the winning attitude of a team.
So, walk us through then kind of professional career up until you get to PJ Fitzpatrick.
So I graduated from York College of Pennsylvania in 2000. I had a degree in mass communications. I wanted to do video editing until I realized that video editing was going to pay me single digits per hour. And I was like, I need to make a shift. And I got caught up with Dish Network, satellite television provider. I joined them in July of 2020, or excuse me, July of 2000. They had one or two satellites in the sky, were the 12th or 13th largest provider in the country, but they had the best technology. They were aggressive, they were competitive, and ultimately they had a leader that wanted to win. And I was there from 2000 to 2000 and late 2004. And I was there during a period where we put 10 satellites in the sky. We grew from a mid-teens provider in the country in terms of scale and size to one of the top 4 providers in the country. And during that time, it was incredibly exciting because we were growing fast. It was high velocity, but we were also winning. We were winning in the sense that we weren't just adding subscribers and growing the business, but we had the best technology. We had the best interfaces, the quickest processors. We were the first to do HDTV. We were the first to do DVRs, with the exception of TiVo, if you blast from the past for a few small of us. They led by innovating. They won by innovating. So I got a chance to go through a variety of roles there. And ultimately, a lot of what drives me and how I approach challenges and opportunities is rooted in my time at Dish Network. In 2004, I had an opportunity to come home. I was actually out in the West Coast at that point, working in Sacramento. I was 26 years old, and overseeing a distribution center that was producing $1 million a day in sales of $99 satellite receivers. So again, high velocity, very fast growth. But I wanted to come home. My now wife, she had her own business at that point and wasn't as flexible to move. My largest account from Philadelphia when I was with Dish Network caught wind that I wanted to come home. They were looking to build a sales and marketing operation to complement their very strong installation services that they were offering throughout the Philadelphia tri-state area. I was with that business, ultimately that family I was with from 2004 to 2020 when I left to come join PJ Fitzpatrick. The satellite business was a company called AntennaStar Satellite. Again, we grew very rapidly from 2004 into 2005 and early 2006 to being one of the largest providers of installation services for Dish Network in the country. We were one of their largest retail accounts, in selling and installing 1,000 customers of our own each year or each month. And we had offices from Virginia Beach up through Maine being able to support that operations. In 2007, the owner of the business came into my office and dropped a little 4x4 sample of granite on my desk. And I looked at him, I said, "What's this?" And he said, that's granite. That's our new business. You got to go down to Home Depot and learn about it. And I went down and stood at this granite wall at Home Depot and taught myself that business. But ultimately what I learned and really has driven my thoughts around business, in many cases, especially service businesses, we sell a business product to a customer, we install a product for a customer, we service it if it's necessary. And the lessons that I had learned in the satellite industry were translatable over to that new industry, which was countertop fabrication. Very similar to the growth of that satellite TV business, we went from a new business in early parts of 2008 to, by 2010, one of the largest fabricators in the country, doing over 100 kitchen and baths per day, servicing Home Depot, Lowe's, every national account, every large retail builder, while also maintaining one of the largest retail showrooms in the country. It was almost a 200,000 yard retail, kitchens, baths, slab yard, everything in between. In 2014, that same ownership group expanded into standby power. So you think about Cummins and Generac, your power turns off, 1, 2, 3, your power turns back on. We got into that business right around when there was a lot of those major hurricanes that occurred in the mid 2000 teens. A year later in 2016, we were in Massachusetts, Philadelphia, and down in Sanford, right outside of Orlando. So we were covering, three markets that had the most power outages in the country at the time. And this is while simultaneously still managing the marble business and still overseeing the satellite business, which we in 2018 rebranded as a Smart Home Services. We were still doing those satellite TV services. We were still had a great relationship with Dish Network, but we expanded into automation for home and business. So, ultimately what it came down to is throughout that time between 2005 and 2020, I mentioned the foundation of why high velocity, high growth, winning, winning by being innovative came from Dish. That time from 2004 to 2020, I was able to be in a position where I was able to experience multiple different industries with similar policies, practices, and procedures. And I was able to live up and down the entirety of the customer journey. So that when the opportunity came to be in a leadership role with PJ Fitzpatrick, I was prepared to be not only able to do the role, but be a strong supporter of the team that I was going to be responsible for.
So you told me last time we chatted a great story about Dish Network and kind of your early aha of learning to compete, ways in which I can compete, sell what you have, tell your story of kind of the Philly market and where Dish Network was and kind of your I'll call it innovative thought, strategic differentiation to make sales happen.
So Philadelphia, when I took over, I came to that market first in I'll call it an assistant manager role, but eventually ended up as the full, I would call it an area sales manager. Philadelphia was the fourth largest market in the country at that point, but the second or third, the last market in the country for Dish Network. We beat Hawaii, and I think we might have maybe beat occasionally another market along the way, but the biggest challenge that Dish Network faced in that market is that Comcast Sportsnet used a loophole in the laws to be able to hold back Comcast Sportsnet, which was us, probably everybody knows Comcast Sportsnet's from different parts of the country now, but at that point, that was their only Sportsnet station. It offered the Phillies, the Flyers, and the Sixers. And if you know Philadelphia sports, you can't really, it's hard to sell TV without being able to give people their sports. And it also, while they could watch their Eagles games on network TV, pregame and postgame was only on Comcast Sportsnet. So it definitely inhibited the growth of Dish Network and DirecTV in that market versus other markets where some were showing explosive growth month in, quarter in, year in. Most, and I don't like to ever use all-encompassing words, but most people closer to all in that market spent most of their time making excuses of why they couldn't sell satellite TV in that market. And so when I came into the role, I'd seen some of the failures and the way that others had approached the market. And I just made a decision I was going to handle myself differently and I was going to handle the opportunity differently. So I didn't have Comcast. I couldn't control that. There's nothing I could do about it. So what could I do? I could find the opportunities that existed. And what I realized very quickly, and I knew it, but it kind of was a crystal ball at that point, is that Dish Network had more international programming coming in from people's home countries than any other provider in the country. And Dish Network, Philadelphia had one of the largest international markets throughout the Northeast. So we retrained our focus. Instead of going after potentially customers who were impacted by sports, we went after customers that were going to be benefited by programming that was exclusive to Dish Network. I started to focus on creating programs and messaging with the dealers' advertising that wasn't related to sports, was related to lifestyle and value within your programming costs. And I think I might have grown it to maybe we were the fourth or fifth from the bottom by the time I ended up leaving. But what I earned was a reputation that it wasn't about what was going to hold me back. It was about finding the reasons that were going to propel myself and those around me to success. That caught the eye of what at that point was the senior VP of sales for Dish Network, a gentleman, Amir Ahmed. And, he put his arms around me and guided me into some next step positions. And, ultimately I do look back and go, not only did I win in that moment because I created a differentiation between myself and the people that had been in that role in the past, but I also created that mindset is going to, it's such a popular word today, but, and I didn't even think of it in that term or word at that point, but I was always going to find the reasons I can be successful
Yeah.
and allow that to guide the conversation and path forward versus what could hold me back that I had no control over.
Well, I have been a student of leadership for a long time, Naval Academy, U.S. Navy, 3-time CEO. And, my reflection post all of this running companies is companies that do it well do two things. Leadership inspires people to believe in something. And, you're here like, well, I believe we can win first and foremost, and this is the path we're going to take to win. And then I go, the second half of leadership is inspiring people to then take action toward those beliefs. So that we got to do something toward the dream to make it happen. And clearly, you did some of that. You've done it in your career. You talked through that backstory of kind of history up until PJ. What was intriguing for me when I first saw it, we had the conversation, is those seem disparate. And then I remind myself all the time that every business on the planet, and this is, I firmly believe it, only does three things. They get work, they do work, and they get paid.
Mhm.
So, we have these like three areas in our company that are, well, how do I go out and attract people to us? Sales, marketing, whatever the effort is. And it's different in different companies, but it's the same. We got to go find new clients. We have to do the work. Whatever we sold, we have to go do. And,
Absolutely.
at this where we got to go put in boxes. We got to offer service. We got to, make sure that our service is up. And your granite business, same thing. And then eventually, once we've done the work, we got to figure out how we get paid, and how well we do each of those three things dictates how well our company runs, all of those things. So, I'm
Absolutely.
always reminded that everyone's like, oh, my business is so much. I'm like, well, it only does these three things. And so, you know, that's an oversimplification, but it helps us understand that business is business, and that, those three key areas of our business can be understood and move. So,
Well, I
um,
think just to hit on that for a second, I think we naturally kind of leads into how we act in the world. Like we find ways that we're different first, as opposed to finding the similarities. And in business, to your point, most of these things are similar. And I actually agree with the oversimplification because sometimes you have to get people to think about things a little bit more simply to actually make the path forward visible for them.
well, and digestible and understood and all the other
Mhm.
things in life. Otherwise, people are like, well, I'm doing this thing. I don't know why. I've been
Well,
told this way. I do it this way because I've been told to do it this way.
well,
So
you and I grew up in a generation that we were told what to do, and we did it because it was what you were supposed to do. You can't ask and expect the same from the generation of people today. They want to understand the root, the foundation, the why. And people look at that as, oh, the millennials and the younger generation are this and that. No, they just want to have a little bit more than just, hey, follow me aimlessly into the woods.
yes. So you leave Colonial Marble and move to PJ. Talk about that, PJ Fitzpatrick. Talk about that transition, how it came
So
about, what drove it.
March 20th, 2020, we all remember that time. For us, that was when Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and all the areas were really starting to shut down. I think most were, but some may have been a little earlier. March 20th, 2020, the world shuts down. March 23rd, 2020, or 22nd, whatever the Monday was, I was at the office. Um, and, for me, nothing really ever changed. But I was at the office, and some of the people that I felt probably should have been at the office with me weren't, and it stuck in my craw, for lack of a better way to put it. And then on March 31st, 2020, I got a call from a recruiter, and I took that call very openly and earnestly because um, level of frustration at that point. So ultimately, what I earned, I knew PJ Fitzpatrick. I knew of their reputation. I had seen the green trucks. Um, I knew that their brand was synonymous with quality. And what I learned during the interviewing process was that everything from I don't want to say, I say I don't want to use absolutes, and I do. Um, a, a lot of what was necessary, the foundation to start scaling the business and growing was in place. What was probably holding back was a little bit more the fear of the unknown. And, you've been there, David. I'm there every day to day. Part of being the leader in business is you lead from the front and you're out there not quite sure what's coming around the bend, but you're going to absorb that blow so that maybe down the line, your team isn't going to deal that. And there's a certain level of attitude and style that allows you to be comfortable in that type of scenario. And there's no right or wrong, but I think the business needed a push. So I was really excited when I got here in July of 20. So it was a little bit of a longer process to go through, but in July 20th of 2020, so coming up on 6 years shortly, I joined PJ Fitzpatrick. And what good.
No, go ahead.
And what I confirmed there was that people, and I'll just use an analogy, they could jump 3 foot forward because they knew they could jump 3 foot forward, but they never, or they would very rarely run the risk of trying to jump 3.25 feet. And so for me, it was a matter of, like you said earlier, inspiring people to believe in themselves, believe in what they've built, and just get the ball rolling. And I'll finish with that comment. I remember when I told the team for the first time, we told them on August 19th of 2020, I gave my first presentation to the team. We laid out a big, hairy, audacious goal of doing 100 million by 2025. And I remember, and he's one of my leaders in the business, the gentleman, Al Smith. He's a rock star. And his eyes, when I said 100 million, were like, and you know what? A couple of months ago, we were in the midst of an integration and acquisition. We had a greenfield we were starting, and we were about to start acquiring another company. And I said, Al, we got this happening. And he goes, okay, boss, let's go. And, once people understand they're far more capable than what they actually believe, we create constraints around ourselves based on what we know. That flywheel. And actually, the very first picture of that presentation was a flywheel. And I showed everybody, I was like, do you know what this is? And it's a flywheel. And do you understand how it works and how it's hard to get moving? But when it gets moving, its energy propels itself. That was that. Sorry, a little bit tangent, but, that was kind of what I was walking into. And a lot of my early task was getting people to believe.
Yeah. So, I mean, can't pile on that enough. I mean, the whole belief thing is huge for me. We've got to take action. And also in that story, I always go, well, the best leaders on the planet drive vision, values, and expectations, and they engage on those first three. That you realize when you get to the CEO seat, I'm no longer doing the work, and that doesn't mean we don't work. It's not the same, and that there's almost always an epiphany when we move and transition to high performing teams, which is what the whole podcast is about. That when it first happens, you're like, what's going on? Because you feel lost, lazy. Hey, I'm not needed in the team. And what you realize is, well, because I've created and casted a vision, I've told people how I want them to act and behave. I've upped the expectation. And yeah, we're blowing through 100 million. And I always frame, as soon as we define the target and get everyone to believe that's the target, and again, inspired to believe it, take action, we'll land near it. But without that, everyone looks at 100 million. I'm like, you're crazy town. I mean, it's just like, that can't happen. And so I'm sure, and we'll talk a little more on this, because I think that's a key, the key essence of getting more from your teams is asking more, getting them to believe. And that
being very specific,
and then do the things. Go ahead.
And being very specific about what success looks like. Because if you leave gaps in the story, the story gets filled in by others, and it doesn't typically happen in the way that we would like. So, when we say we wanted to be at 100 million, it was 100 million by this date. Here's the group of people that are going to be responsible. How we plan and prepare ourselves for growth is a lot of the times the reason we're able to sustain it, because we set very specific targets. But I think, when you say vision, values, and what was the last one?
Expectations. And then my fourth is engagement, that I gotta, I can't just do those once. I have to go talk about them, work with people, be alongside them to drive those first three home all the time. That we're, I talked about it, what we're trying to become. I will say over and over again, if you want to be the Northeast's best roof and repair company, most trusted, the largest, the whatever, um, people have to hear it over and over again. And I even use a Nick Saban story where he talked about when he was at Alabama, like one of the first thing he did with every single player is, what do you want to get out of your experience here at Alabama? And he said, I love the answers that sounded like I want to start on Saturday and one day play on Sunday. And the reason he said I love that is because then I could ask them every time they did something, is what you did helping you start on Saturday, play on Sunday?
I
And
love
so same litmus test for PJ Fitzpatrick. If it's the most trusted Northeast roof and repair company, you then go, well, did you help us become that today or did you hurt us?
it.
And
Yep. I love that.
that litmus test for everyone to understand where we're headed and then pour into it. And I always, we're in business. We got to make money. I go, those things will happen if we do the vision thing right. If we become what we want to become, money will happen. And, we got to do all the stuff in the back office business to make sure it's happening. So we'll explore that more. When you got to PJ, you and I talked a little bit. What did you find? What was the company? And you've been great. Like, there's a strong history. They were successful, but clearly they wanted change or you wouldn't have been there. So, what did you find?
So I take one quick step back. So when Peter was running the business in the early 2000s, he was receiving consulting services from two gentlemen. This gentleman, Dave Geiger. Dave Geiger is the founder of a company, Horizon Services, close to $1 billion HVAC company. And then Tim Humphreys is a financial financial professional consultant. Him and Tim got connected via the brokering of one of those deals that as Dave's business was growing. They were providing consultative services to Peter. And then when Rick and Teresa took over the business, they were providing services to them as well and just helping them build and grow the business. So when they started in the early 2000s, we were about a $2 million business, and they helped Peter grow it from a $2 million business to about an $8 million business by 2008. They helped Rick and Teresa grow that business from about 8 million to about 25 million by 2011. But just life in different times, everybody went off in different directions. Coincidentally enough, in early 2020, Rick and Dave were on a flight to a legal conference down in, I think it was in Florida, and I'm sure that was enthralling and exciting. They say that the one thing that's sure about a legal conference is everyone's racing to the bar at the end of the sessions. But by the time they took off and landed, they had made a decision that they were going to partner and take a stab at growing this business. And Rick always felt like and Teresa felt like they had a lottery ticket, but they just weren't cashing it. And some of that came back to, that not being comfortable in the unknown and not being comfortable with risk and the agenda and challenges that come along with it. So one of the things I think that Rick did, which I just am so always impressed with, is him and this other gentleman in the business who were the president and the general manager both looked at each other and said, we're not going to get this done. And my God, there's no way I could ever be successful in the business without either of them. Rick's steady hand, his calm guidance, make me, and the autonomy and trust he's put in me makes him so invaluable to me. So that's kind of how we ended up in that situation of me getting there. So when I got there, they had built an amazing framework. We had key leaders throughout the business who not only were doing well where they were, but had potential to grow. They believed in the employee experience. They believed in education. Culture wasn't words on the wall. Culture lived in the way that we spoke about customers, about each other, about the intent and wants of the business. And it was a technology-infused business that was already paperless, already understood that technology and process automation were part of what was going to help us be able to scale and grow. So a lot of what was missing was, one, someone to push it, give them that first push, but also what to do when you start growing. And throughout my career, I'd spent, I had greenfielded multiple businesses for for that family, expanded offices across PA, New Jersey, and Maryland. I had been part of their acquisitions of other companies. I had had a lot of experiences in what was going to be necessary to grow the business. So what I found was a lottery ticket that just needed to be cashed. And I wasn't afraid to go down to the bank to make sure it could be done, for lack of a better way to put it.
So you referenced core values. Some consultants in the business. I'm on your website. I'm looking at your core values. Were those already in place when you got there?
They were. So prior to me joining the business, they were already, like I said, they were doing a lot of the things right already. And they had get connected with Petra. If you ever heard of the book Scaling Up by Vern
Yeah.
Hardish,
Yeah.
they were
No.
they were part of that Petra program. So they had gone through, a Purple Mice on Mars exercise of, let's define what the perfect employee, who's the PJ person. They'd gone through the development of the core values, the core purpose.
Yeah. Awesome.
That was kind of as far as they got when I got there. So, being able to go through those exercises and having planning being an active part of our business when I got there, was a fresh change for me, because that wasn't part of a lot of my life. When you're working for private businesses, they don't always put the same type of standardization practices in place to be able to scale and grow, because they're not thinking about 5 years from now. They're thinking about how they're going to pay their bills 5 months from now. And
No.
that part was different at PJ.
Well, and I love the way you guys have this scaling up, BOS, Pinnacle. There's a bunch of business operating systems, and before I really knew all that as a student of those, which now I spend a lot of my time doing that work. I talked about when I ran companies is everyone needs to know where we're going. They need to know how we want them to act and behave, and then I'm going to set really high expectations. And I used to joke and I go, "We're all just going to throw darts in the same direction instead of throwing them randomly all over the room. We're all going to aim at the exit sign." And if we all aim at the exit sign, guess what? All the darts are over there by the exit sign. If we fall a little short, a little above, we're all aiming at the same thing. So that was my leadership before all this. But your core values are great. I'll just read them to the listening audience. Embrace the team. And then I think what I love about you guys is you give it what it means. Bring it together, keep it together. Yeah. And then take ownership, strap on the tool belt, and get it done. And I have plenty of organizations that are like, get shit done. That fits their culture. You guys are, it seems to me that there's that without we're not going to use the word shit. Champion integrity. You have one chance, make it count, make it fun, laugh, smile, be grateful and positive, make people feel good and bold. And then wow every customer, exceed expectations every time. And so those are awesome, James.
And I think it's on the website. We have it built into a house.
Yeah, it is.
So the foundation of the house, I believe, I can't remember now. It's embrace the, I should know this, embrace team. But like ultimately, when you look at our core values, 4 of those core values are about our people. So if we execute on those 4 core values, embrace the team, make it fun, champion integrity, take ownership, we give the fuel to fulfill our 5th core value, wow every customer. And if we live our core values in pursuit of our core purpose, we make life better one home at a time. And that's the house. That's what we're responsible for in people's lives. And I tell our team, if you are doing something and it isn't about a KPI achievement, a priority, moving a priority within our business forward, which is part of that planning process, as you know, or it's not about a core value, you really shouldn't be doing it, because and it allows us to have narrow focus. Because what we say here, David, you say the throwing darts at the exit, everyone sings spot. We say we want to be rowing in the same direction, and rowing in the same direction is everybody understanding where we're going. So part of, and this from Petra, setting goals, I never say to my team, and I will say never in this one case, hey, David, I want you to grow sales. No, David, I want you to grow sales by 4% from a baseline of X to an end result of Y by this date. Here are the tasks that are going to be necessary. This is what success looks like. And most importantly, these are the obstacles we're going to face, because let's talk about them up front so we're ready for them when they come. And that piece there. The one thing I would add to your the vision and values, that fourth step, is freedom to fail. Because people's fear of failing holds them back from achieving their full capability. So when you give people the freedom to fail, our language here is wins and L's, but our L's are lessons. Because if you take stock, you learn, you make yourself better, then you move the ship forward, and we continue to row that same direction.
So we'll jump a little ahead. So that's what you find when you take it. It sounds like a lot of good things in place. If you jump to today, what does PJ Fitzpatrick look like today? What's different? What have you accomplished? What are you most proud of?
So we've grown the business, where we're pacing this year, we'll have grown the business about 13-fold over a six and a quarter year period. We'll have grown the staff from 116 people when I got there. It was 116 to, it was 803 as of our weekly business weekly business review last week, yesterday. We have created a wealth of opportunities. We've allowed people to move forward in their careers. We've enabled people to have the comfort and security to buy homes, to get married, to have children. We've created a culture, and I don't want to say we've built upon the culture so that as we continue to grow and service more homes in a larger body, the foundation of what makes us special is still there. Now, I would say one of the bigger drivers of that success is a continued commitment to our teams. We created a couple different unique things in our business. One is PJ University. PJ University is, while it's part of our business, it's a independently run part of our business that's focused on being able to give people the skills, training, support to grow. So that part of our business is run by a learning and development professional with over 25 years of experience. Some of the learning and development team members, a couple of them are doctorates in education. It's true education organization, because if you had to ask me what we do, that's what we do, because we're constantly bringing new people into the business, training, uplifting them. Now, that PJ University, and I'm going to add a little bit more here, because I think this is one of the most things I look back on the most with pride, is there's a great book called First Break All the Rules. And there's a part in First Break All the Rules where they talk about promoting people to their level of incompetence. And Rick and I read that book together again right after I kind of joined the business, and him and I just got caught on that. And we started to get our minds around that. We don't promote people to their level of incompetence. We promote them into roles that we don't prepare them for and leave them to flail and fail. So part of what we did with PJ University was, hey, we created 3 tenets. We have technical training. This is the things that you need to do to be able to perform your role. Developmental training. These are things that we can provide to you that are going to help you personally and professionally. They make you a better person. They make you more well-rounded. And then we created a leadership tenet. And part of that was creating a program called Emerging Leaders. So as opposed to promoting a person into the level of incompetence, let's give them the prerequisites before the opportunity creates. So we're actually now running our 3rd cohort of it. Every employee that's part of it is actually nominated into the program by their manager or a peer. A peer meaning a manager of a different department. In that scenario, those people are being taught how to write reviews, how to do one-on-ones, how to provide constructive criticism, how to be empathetic, how to handle difficult customers. Let's not wait for them to be in the moment before they have to learn that skill. Separately, in that same book, it became really clear to me that there are people, we believe that I think people want to think that everybody wants to be a leader. But a lot of people want to do their job well and have opportunities to continue to grow and develop. So I'll use an example of our bath department. When I got here, we had apprentices and we had lead installers, and you had to be you had to have skills to be an apprentice, and you only could be a lead installer if you were an apprentice first. Today we have junior apprentices, people that come off the street. They have the will, maybe without the skill. We have senior apprentices. Journeymen are people that are ready to become lead installers. We have lead installers. We have master installers. We have an elite installation group. We're creating growth both professionally and financially in many cases for people without having to take that step into leadership, which sometimes people will make that move into leadership, not because they want it, but because they don't have another way to grow in their professional life.
Well, and they often want the increase that comes with it. So, like, I mean, that's a common, like, well, yeah, I want more money. So I got to go do this next job. And the next job is leading 6 people. And I joke about it. I do a bunch of personality assessments, and there's a handful of profiles that I call really good soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, and when you go to a really good soldier and go, hey, do you want this next opportunity? They're trained to say, yes, sir, first of all. And two, when you say, hey, it's more money, they're like, yes. And then quickly they get into the role and go, you mean I'm responsible for 6 other people? And I have to hold accountable, and I have to, and literally like, I just want to go back and, I joke and go, I want to go back and take the gun apart, clean the gun, put it back together and shoot it. That's what I'm really good at. You're like, well, no, now you're running the armory. And they look at you like, I wish I would have known that. And to your point, I always say the same with a good soldier. Well, I can train a good soldier to run the armory, but I have to take the time to train them to run the armory.
Yep.
If I just say you're in charge, they're going to go, I don't know what being in charge means. So,
and at PJ University, in terms of, we have people that are developing the content. We have people who are doing the actual sessions. Now we actually have a new program that's being launched right now called Empower. Our learning and development, our talent development manager, she actually read this book, networked with the writer of the book. She put together the program, and now he's the keynote speaker for the program. And that program is about taking our managers and creating directors and VPs. The last step will be, how do we take directors and VPs and create C-level talent out of them? And one of the things that I think is difficult for people is when people aren't honest about what growth as a leader means. And I mentioned this to you when we were chatting before. And I didn't even give you the full story. So when I came from Dish Network to work for the satellite, Antenna Star Satellites, the local company that ended up owning all those different businesses, they brought me in, I'm going to be the leader of their sales and marketing. And then a couple months later, they brought in a VP above me. And I was like, what the heck?
yeah.
What I know now is they brought me in a mentor. He was towards the end of his career. They brought me a mentor because I was shot out of a cannon, on a day-to-day basis. But what he taught me, and it was sometimes it's just simple phrases that you store and you look back on. He said, if you want to be a leader, every step forward you take, you're more of an HR manager. And I was like, you're nuts. And I look back now and I'm like, you're so brilliant, because I'm in the business of people. And a lot of the people a layer below me and a layer below, they're more in the business of people than they are in the business of hammering nails and selling jobs. So, that commitment and that understanding kind of reframes how you approach that mission.
Well, you didn't tell me the story about the guy above you, but I heard the story. My first reaction is, why didn't he just tell you that?
Yeah.
Why didn't he sit you down and go, hey, James, you one day may be running this company. That's how we're viewing you. So we're bringing somebody in at the end of the career that you can learn from. We want Yoda here to teach you.
Transparency always helps.
Yeah, young Luke Skywalker. Yeah.
That goes back. I filled in a lot of that story myself because they didn't control the narrative around it. And I'm not a control freak in terms of how, I'm not a micromanager, but I micromanage messaging. The words that come from my mouth matter, and me being clear, them having clarity, and then everybody being able to go off into the sunset. But I think the other piece is I create an environment where I'm present so that if they do feel they're off target or they're not sure, I'm available to them. And I do that, even to the point now where I didn't like that my door's shut when I have certain meetings. So I actually have a thing on my door that says my door's shut, knock, or my door's shut, I'm actually tied up if I need to close that door, because I want people to flow in and ask. And, so again, I think we're very purposeful and intentional about the way we communicate, and we can expect consistent results because of that.
So, thus far, it sounds like, hey, you've done a great job. The organization's growing, the team's thriving. There's a bunch of positive signs forward. Often, I talk about this is, yeah, there are a lot of people that are overnight 10-year sensations that, all the hard work, all the mistakes, all the things that happen, we tend to gloss over. We tend to go, oh, yeah, I got through all that stuff and things are great. And that part of this podcast is to help people understand, like, well, no, there was stuff in there that didn't go well. There were times where I was like throwing my hands up going, I don't know. And you alluded to something earlier that I used to tell my teams all the time: get used to certainty from me when there is none. And what I always meant by that is, no, this is our path right now. We're running really hard in the way we're running until we know it's wrong. So, and I go, I'm not, and I would often say this in moments of vulnerability, I'm not certain, but I'm going to tell you I am so that we can run that way, that I'm inspiring you to believe that we can run through the wall. Let's go run through the wall, until we run against the wall and go, oh man, we can't run through that wall. And then it's, well, what else might work? And so what I didn't want is the vacillation once we agreed, like, no, there's certainty. This is the path. So
It's funny. I hired a VP of procurement recently, and he said to me in an interview, I loved. He's like, I don't want people that are going to run through the wall. I'm going to want people that are going to figure out how to build the door. And I think that's about the statement is quippy, but it's about building people with intent, people that are going to create solutions and find solutions, not find reasons to not get things done. So it's hard to be in that situation where you need to have certainty. Did you ever read the book Think Again?
yeah,
By Adam Grant? I don't know if we
yeah.
talked about this before. My very first day at PJ, and actually maybe even before, Rick and Therese were like, you got to read this book. And it's been a game changer for me. Absolute game changer. Because
Well, go ahead.
it was a game changer for me because as a result today, without getting in all the details, I look at our business as being our stories written in pencil, because I need to be willing to show as an example to my team that we are on that path. We're setting this tone together. We're going this direction, but with new information, new data, and new expectations, I'm willing to rewrite that story. And being willing to do that, one of the worst things that exists is the line, practice makes perfection. Because practice makes perfection creates limitations on what you're capable of, what you can achieve. And what I like to be is, let's be great today, even better tomorrow. So part of that is all these different things that create absolutes. Well, let's just be willing to keep moving ourselves forward.
Well, this was best illustrated. I was exploring this with my Vistage group. I have 16 business leaders that I meet with every month, and somehow we got on the topic of this whole certainty. I think it was Same as Ever. We were talking about, it's the guy who wrote like The Psychology of Money. And anyway, there was a thing there where we were talking about certainty and what it means. And one of my business owners, who's a airplane pilot and a hot air balloon pilot, he said, oh shit. He goes, this helps me understand something that I've not been able to understand. He goes, I've given plane flight lessons and balloon lessons. And he goes, flying a plane is very predictable. You put a flight plan, you start here, you're going to land there. It's, unless there's a catastrophe, that's what happens. You plan the flight and you fly it. He goes, hot air balloon. He goes, this hits me every time I get in a hot air balloon. He goes, I give people balloon rides all the time. He goes, invariably, you're 10 to 15 feet off the ground and somebody says, where are we going to land? And he inside his head jokes and goes, I don't know. Now, he goes, I used to share that, and it scared the hell out of people. And, what we're talking about is, yeah, we're on a path. The wind's blowing that way, and we need to make all the decisions to keep a successful, balloon flight. And, so I've used this metaphor a bunch, like, yeah, we're going to go that direction. This is what we're doing. And he talked about it. He goes, and his, culture index profile is called Daredevil. It's, I love the challenge of, I don't know where we're going to land. And he goes, even for me, there are days that you look and go, yeah, if we fly balloons today, there's a great chance we land in a big lake by us. And he goes, so I don't fly balloons that day. But there are other days that you go, I'm probably going to land in somebody's cornfield. and the farmer's going to meet me with a shotgun and be really mad, and I'm going to have to pay him some money and buy his crops. He goes, but it'll all be fun. So, there's a moral in all that. Like, it's directional. We need to inspire. We need people to feel comfortable. So where I was leading in all that, James, is there have to be things in that journey at PJ Fitzpatrick where you went, man, I'm not sure we're going to get where I want, that we're really struggling today. Are there some of those when I pose that to you that you go, oh yeah, this was this challenge. This is where we were for 6 months or a year
I
that
mean,
you can share?
I mean, you want to talk about the last hour or last year? There's always things that, when you look back on, I think part of being able to give people permission to fail is we're not always going to get that output. So there is constant stories, but those stories are the fuel that gets us forward. A couple of things that come to mind was first the transition into COVID and out of COVID. And I know we're never, like, that's a weird way to put it, but like when the doors started opening homes again in June and July of 2020, and then carrying in through probably the early part of 2022, people were at the door with their checkbooks. They couldn't go anywhere. They couldn't entertain themselves. They were going to get their house done. And so a lot of the skills and capabilities that drove successful home improvement salespeople weren't being used and continued to be perfected on a day-to-day basis. We also had to bring in, because of the tremendous growth in the industry as a whole, we had to bring in a lot of newcomers. So it was less veterans and more newbies out in front of the field. And that transition has never changed, because the business of home improvement continues to grow as there's more focus on people on their homes and that keeping them right. That we had a lot of struggles of being able to get out of that period of people being at the door with their checkbooks to actually having to be true sales professionals again, building value, building urgency when required, and ultimately using methodology and appropriate scripting to guide us to that sale. That was a really, really challenging piece, and it took a lot of hard work and effort from our organization to be able to get through it. It coincided. It's kind of the start of what led into a point. It was July 1st. I'll just say July 1st, 2023. But in June of that month, I'd gone back to our owners and I said, hey, we did $125 million last year and we didn't make a lot of money. And we are the 7-foot seventh grader. We're going to be the best player on our basketball team in a couple of years, but we can barely step left foot over right foot. And our owners at that point, Rick, Teresa, Tim, and Dave, gave us the grace to slow down. And we spent that third and fourth quarter of 2023 really focused on building the right skills to scale, because we weren't projecting headcount right. We weren't projecting vehicles right. I swear to God, David, there was a point where I got a report that said we had 450 vehicles. I'm like, we have 430 employees. How's this even possible? And our growth had created all of these different leaking points throughout the business. And as opposed to being afraid to face the challenge, we got the grace from the owners and a commitment as a team that we still believed in where we were going. This was a matter of making corrections and doing the right thing to set ourselves up appropriately for the next step. And that Petra planning process and how that, lived in our business, if we didn't have that, I don't know if we get out of that hole. Because our intent in message, our intent in agreement of where we were going, and then a commitment and a frequent cadence of checking on it enabled us to ensure that we were able to get back. There was one other major contributor to how we got out of that hole, but I'll leave that for a different moment.
Yeah, I'm curious. You said something that I always stress with successful businesses, or find that is stressed in successful businesses, is cadence. You mentioned it there, and I talk about it all the time. I'm like, well, what's your meeting cadence? How are you talking? How often are you talking about it? And it's often more than cadence, but cadence for me is like, it's the review of our diet. And we say, well, you can't eat the cookie and you need to exercise. And if we say that enough and do it and are focused on it and have metrics, then we tend not to eat the cookie and we exercise. And then guess what? Oh, wow, the diet worked. So many people are on diets and saying, hey, we're doing it. They're just not keeping up well, did you step on the scale today? Did you look at how much you weigh? Did you make decisions on that? And Cadence is always important to me. What do you guys do at PJ in terms of senior leadership? What is your cadence?
So I'll give you my direct reports. I have 2-weekers with them, very similar to it's the scaling up program. Most of our cadences and structure is scaling up foundation with us growing out beyond it. So daily huddles with my leadership team, weekly business review with a larger scaled out management group, 2-weekers with my team. If you are an employee that doesn't manage others, you're going to get a once a month one-on-one with your manager. One-on-ones and 2-weekers in our business are very much about that person. It's not about what I want to achieve. It's about what they want to get out of that meeting. It's a mixture of personal and professional, but it's one of the big things that we incorporated, and it's been incorporated in our business, but we've really leaned into it and it's a major component of both of these processes is start, stop, keep. What should we start doing? What should we stop doing? What should we keep doing? Those exist both in our one-on-ones as well as in larger departmental group sessions where we get the teams together to elicit that feedback. And it's not just taking the feedback in, it's going back and processing that information and coming back and explaining to them what we're doing about it, what we're doing, what we have to put in the parking lot, what can't happen, why it can't happen. So, a lot of these cadences are about not just the meeting, but the commitment to the steps following them and the execution on them. There's so many more things. I don't want to take up all the time doing that, that we've incorporated in the business. But what it is if it's something important, talk about it early, talk about it often, do it, like you said, on a cadence. And we've also incorporated, who, what, whens as part of every meeting. We start meetings by reviewing our who, what, whens. We end our meetings by identifying that because we create guardrails about what we've agreed to achieve.
Are you guys still doing quarterly rocks?
Yep. Yeah, we call them priorities. So we start with our annual initiatives. Annual initiatives are what we want to be or what we want to be capable of by the end of the next year. That's our yearly marathon, and then our quarterly sprints are the priorities for carrying us through.
Yeah. When you reflect on the success, what's been the hardest? What's been the hardest thing to make happen?
Early on was being able to get people to believe in themselves. So what I mean by that is there was a tremendous amount of respect amongst the leadership and amongst the management down to the employees. And most of those people were their best cheerleaders were those around them. They believed in them. They believed that they were capable of, but people weren't necessarily pushing each other. And the people didn't have those same inward feelings. So, being able to take the time to develop the relationship, to build the trust, and then really to start to push them to try to achieve heights. And some of the more difficult things have been the conversations around those that can't.
Yeah.
And finding solutions that enable them to still contribute to the business and still be part of the mission, but to not maybe be in the wheelhouse of where they were. So, we've had a number of those moments where we've had to, I'm not afraid to deconstruct the business to build it up better for the future. And we haven't had to deconstruct the entire business other than that one time. But we've had to deconstruct parts of that business. And when you're dealing with those moments, it's hard. You're dealing with people. And if you don't get upset about those moments as a person, then I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I use a couple baseball analogies and all of this around talent and where they are. I go, everyone's got to be able to do two things. They got to be great in the clubhouse and they got to play in the field.
Yep.
And, and I go, we'll have people that are better at one of those than the other. And what I start to frame is, but we need people that are average or better. That we shouldn't tolerate a all-star first baseman that's a jerk in the clubhouse. We shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Nor should we keep people that can't play a position on the field. They're a 10 out of 10 in the clubhouse, But when we go, where can they play on the field? You're like, well, they can't catch. And then I'll have people go, well, maybe they can DH. Well, they can't hit either. And if you can't catch and you can't hit, I don't know where you play baseball. And so, now we can coach them. I use that same metaphor. We need to spend a lot of time. Can we coach? Can we develop? Can we do? But if you can't catch, we go, I don't know where we put you on the baseball.
Yeah.
And what a lot of organizations tend to do is go, well, we got this thing that's sort of popcorn bat boy, part-time cheerleader. We're going to put him in that role. And, so I was always keen to go,
role.
Yeah, we're paid to do work here. We have, I use the baseball analogy. There's 9 positions on the field. These are the things we need to fill. We need all-stars at every position that want to be in the clubhouse with us and that we want in the clubhouse with us. And then it's the challenge of, well, great. How do we develop that team? How do we scale that team? What does the new offensive coach look like? And you can play that metaphor out forever. Sounds like you guys have done that well. Are there things that you look at going forward, either in talent or this cadence, that will be struggles at the next level? And you could be like, well, that's part of the university we're building. That's part of what you alluded to earlier. Like, well, we know we need more.
I mean, I think what we set up in our business is a lot of times our reactions, and we've done a pretty good job of creating some proactive steps. But, ultimately, the biggest challenge that I see for the next scale is every step further in growth, we are one step further from our foundation. And there are more and more voices in our business from a leadership standpoint that weren't here when we kicked off this journey in 2020 of growth. And so being able to build team members who live that live our business, live the core values, the core purpose, that inspire that in others, that's a hard part of our business. And that's something that makes me nervous, because the most effective leaders are the ones that we bring up from within our business. It doesn't mean that I guess, let me rephrase that. Those with the shortest path in most cases to success are those that we bring up in the business, because they understand the roots and the foundation. So our growth is wonderful, but it creates a people challenge. Yeah. The university was created for them, and it's done a great job of filling us as we were doing things 1 by 1 or 2 by 2. But how's it going to work when we're doing 3 or 4 new markets a year? 1 or 2 acquisitions, 3 or 4 acquisitions. How will our talent pool be impacted by that? That is a huge one. Being able to be ahead of the mindset of how home improvement sales were done, the come to your home, give you a presentation, the conditions that people want ideally aren't going to be there in a couple of years, as there are more dual income households, as there are more dual income households with no kids, as the demographics change. There's so much that's different about the next generation of home buyers than the generation of home buyers and a lot of the customers we're dealing with. So being able to adapt and continue to be the best we can for a person and we don't know who they are yet, that makes me nervous. AI makes me nervous. I don't want to be first to the game in AI. I want to be comfortably 1A, 1B, or maybe even 2, because in unknown, there's one thing when you're leading a path down the unknown. It's different when you're leading yourself down a path in the unknown to the unknown. And what I mean by that is, when we're in the unknown, it's within our business, but there are general practices and people we can look to that have followed these steps in the past and had success. Yeah. There are some things that are just out there that we don't know. We don't really understand what the end impact will be. But that's why we're out in front of the business and we allow ourselves to take some of those blows. So, but those are a couple of things that make me nervous coming up in the next probably 3 to 5 years.
Awesome. If we jump ahead, we're in 2026. We'll call it 2030. Success looks like what?
$800 million a year in annual revenue. PJ Fitzpatrick green flags everywhere east of the Mississippi. Probably not in Florida, not because of anything other than I think we have $800 million in business without having to make that jump. And I think that'll be a next step from there. Um, we'll continue to be um, the industry leader in the type of experience we provide to customers, continue to be one of the best workplaces in the industry, continue to live by our values, continue to enable this foundation to be present and be our guiding light in this business. The revenue's great, but what I'm most excited for is creating opportunities for people, helping more people build comfort in their lives and growth in their careers, and continuing to do right by customers. Because what I want to be able to do in 2030 is still put my head on the pillow and feel really great about what I do every day. And if I take care of my people and we take care of our customers, then everything else will come into play.
Yeah, very similar to my mom and grandfather, and I say it all the time, make your small corner of the world a better place. That's what we should be focused on. If we can do that every day, then, hey, we're doing what we should be doing for mankind.
Well, when you
It
come from educators too, when we talked about that,
yeah, yeah,
education being a part of the roots of our families, it's hard not to take that approach.
yeah, and there's, that's part of, why we do organizational stuff, where we have people involved, and we want them to thrive as well. Um, James, if people wanna find more about you or follow you or PJ Fitzpatrick, where should they go?
So for PJ Fitzpatrick, trustpj.com is our website. We're very intentional about what we want want our customers and the people that come to the site to do. And that's an important. So I think sometimes you just have to will things into existence by speaking them, and so we do. In terms of me, I'm on LinkedIn. James Freeman, CEO of PJ Fitzpatrick. I don't know the link, but I would encourage, if you're somebody that ever just wants to network or wants to have an ear or chat. I love being able to support others, and I wouldn't be able to sit successfully in the seat I'm in if I didn't have a tremendous amount of people who put trust in me, gave me support, and I'm willing to do that for others as well. So if I can ever be a support for anybody, don't hesitate to find me.
Yeah, last thing, if you, reflect on, what you've done, and had to give advice to others that are, embarking on a similar journey, what's the simple advice you would give them?
Man, that's a fire question. Um, I don't know. I guess trying to think of all, I would say, be willing to fail, be willing to flail, be willing to take the hard hits, because the best moments live on top of that foundation, and those are where you're going to truly define what you want to be.
Said something similar my whole career, like, you learn a lot more from failure than you do success. Success seems like awesome and it's great, but you're like, all right, that the path to that success is where the learning took place. So,
Absolutely, absolutely.
well, James, I really appreciate your candor, your time. Great story. There's much for the audience to take. And if you have, an opportunity to speak with James and you're interested, please reach out. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, David.